place where the worst thing you expect is a surprise quiz or a fight in the cafeteria. But safety is an illusion. Every school has something lurking beneath the surface. Every hallway has shadows that stretch further than they should. The lockdown drills they make you practice, they tell you it's to keep danger out, but sometimes the real danger is already inside. And sometimes the lockdown isn't to protect you. It's to keep it from getting out. Tonight, 3 tales, 3 schools, 3 ordinary days that became something no student or teacher should have survived. The intercom crackles, the blinds are pulled, the doors are locked, and then the real nightmare begins. Before we start, make sure you subscribe. Not because I want you to, but because if you don't, the next time you hear the words, "This is not a drill," you might hear your own name being called next. And if that happens, there will be no one left to lock the door. It began with the sound of breathing. The intercom in Mrs. Carter's history class had always hissed before announcements, but this was different. It was slow, deliberate. The kind of breathing that made you think of someone standing right behind you. Then the voice came. "Attention, students. We are now going into lockdown. This is not a drill." The words were familiar. The voice was not. It wasn't the principal. It wasn't the vice principal. It wasn't anyone I recognized. It was warped, like 2 people speaking at once, one in front of the mic and one far away, whispering the same words just out of sync. Mrs. Carter froze mid-sentence, chalk still in her hand. "You know what to do," she said quickly. "Away from the windows, lights off. Quiet." Desks scraped, shoes shuffled. I found myself pressed against the wall behind a filing cabinet, knees pulled tight to my chest. The blinds snapped shut, the lights went out. And then, the bells started ringing, not the high-pitched alarm we'd heard in fire drills. These were deep, slow chimes, muffled as if they were echoing from far underground. The sound vibrated through the floor, through my bones. Then the voice came again. "Room 204. That was our room. 2 students missing. A cold wave ran through me. We were all here, weren't we? I looked around in the dim light. And then I saw it. The spaces where Ryan and Lily had been sitting only minutes earlier were empty. Their backpacks were still there, their notebooks. Even Ryan's phone, screen still glowing faintly. But they were gone. The chimes rang again. From somewhere in the hallway came footsteps. Slow, heavy, wet, like bare feet slapping against tile. The voice called another room number, another missing count. I hugged my knees tighter, my heart pounding so hard I was sure whoever, or whatever, was out there could hear it. Minutes passed. Or maybe it was longer. The bells stopped. And then, in the silence, the door handle began to turn. Mrs. Carter moved fast, pressing her body against the door. The handle twitched again, harder. Then, a knock. It wasn't loud. It was slow, rhythmic. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. She didn't move. None of us breathed. The knocking stopped. Footsteps drifted away. The intercom crackled again. Room 204. All students accounted for. That was a lie. Ryan and Lily were still gone. Mrs. Carter stayed at the door for a long time. Then she whispered, "We're moving to the supply closet. Stay quiet." One by one, We slipped into the narrow, dark space at the back of the classroom. The air was thick with the scent of dust and paper. I crouched between boxes of old textbooks, my knees aching. That's when I realized something. The supply closet had no lock. We waited, no bells, no voice. Only the faint hum of the school's old ventilation system. Then I heard something. Not from the hallway, from inside the classroom. It was humming. A low, tuneless hum coming from near the door. Mrs. Carter stiffened. The humming stopped. And then, a whisper. It wasn't coming from the intercom. It was inside the room. At first I couldn't make out the words. Then they became clear. It was my name, repeated slowly, over and over. The air in the closet grew colder. Something scraped against the wall, high up, near the ceiling. A sound like fingernails dragging. The whispering grew louder, closer, until it sounded like it was just outside the closet door. Then, silence. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Eventually, Mrs. Carter opened the door just enough to peek out. The classroom was empty. We stepped back inside cautiously. But something was different. The windows were gone. Not covered. Gone. Just smooth walls where they'd been. The desks weren't ours anymore. Old wooden ones scratched with names I didn't recognize. The clock was missing its hands, and the door was no longer the same color. It looked older, heavier. Mrs. Carter reached for the handle and froze. Because on the door, carved deep into the wood, were two names. Ryan Miller, Lily Thompson. The moment Mrs. Carter's fingers brushed the door handle, the intercom came alive again. Room 204. One student missing. The chimes began to toll again. We all froze. I counted quickly. Everyone was here. Then I realized, no. Alex, the kid hiding near the bookshelf, was gone. His backpack was still there. His phone lay face down on the carpet, but Alex himself had vanished. Mrs. Carter's lips trembled as she looked at me. We didn't speak, but we both knew the truth. It didn't matter how quiet we were or how still we stayed. Something could take us without ever opening the door. The footsteps returned. This time they weren't in the hallway. They were inside the classroom. We could hear the faint slap of wet skin on tile, moving slowly between the desks. It paused. And then the sound shifted from footsteps to something else. A dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Then a deep inhale, so close it felt like the air was being sucked right out of my lungs. We couldn't see it, but we could hear it moving toward us. Mrs. Carter motioned for everyone to get back in the closet. We slipped inside, the darkness swallowing us whole. The closet door stayed open a crack, just enough for me to see shapes moving in the room beyond. Not human shapes, they were too tall, too thin. Their limbs bent at wrong angles, like they'd been broken and never healed. And where their faces should have been, there was nothing, just smooth, pale skin. The chimes grew louder, pounding against my skull. Every ring seemed to make the lights flicker, not just in the classroom, but in the closet too. Then the voice came again. Room 204. All students accounted for. But I knew that was a lie. Because now Alex's name was carved into the wood of the door, I wanted to ask Mrs. Carter what was happening. But I couldn't move my mouth. My jaw felt locked in place, as if the air itself was holding me still. The bell tolled once more, and for a split second, the closet wasn't the closet anymore. It was a hallway. A long, narrow hallway lined with doors, each one shut, each one with a name carved into it. Names I recognized, names of kids from our school who had moved away, or just never came back after break. At the far end of the hallway stood one of the faceless things. It was holding something in its hands. A bell. But instead of a clapper, there was an eye inside it staring straight at me. I blinked and the closet was back. Mrs. Carter whispered for us to move. She said we had to get to the main office. We stepped into the classroom cautiously. The desks were back to normal. The clock had its hands again. For a moment, it felt like we might actually make it. We moved into the hallway. It was silent. Too silent. The air was heavy like the moments before a storm. Halfway to the office, the intercom crackled again. Room 204. 3 students missing. The chimes started once more. And then, the hallway ahead of us changed. It stretched, the walls bending outward like they were breathing. The lockers grew taller, their doors warping into jagged shapes. The fluorescent lights overhead began to sway, though there was no wind. From behind us came the wet footsteps. Closer now. Faster. Mrs. Carter grabbed my wrist and pulled me into an open classroom. We slammed the door shut, shoved a desk in front of it. But the door handle began to rattle almost immediately. The knocking came next, slow, deliberate, that same 3-tap pattern. Everyone was pressed against the far wall when the intercom whispered my name. Not my full name, just my first name. Over and over, each time softer, but closer. I covered my ears, but the sound was inside my head now. The lights flickered, and in that strobe of darkness and light, I saw them. Dozens of the faceless things, crowding against the windows, pressing their hands to the glass. Each hand had too many fingers. And the fingers were all pointing at me. The desk in front of the door began to slide away on its own. We couldn't stop it. The door swung open, and the hallway beyond was gone. In its place was that long, narrow hallway from before, lined with carved doors. I didn't want to step forward, but my legs moved anyway, pulling me into the darkness. Mrs. Carter screamed for me to stop, but her voice sounded far away, like she was speaking from the other end of a tunnel. I walked past door after door, running my hand along the carvings. When I reached the one with my name on it, the handle turned by itself. The door swung open, and inside was my desk from history class. On top of it sat a bell with an eye inside. It blinked, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was back in my seat in Mrs. Carter's class. The clock read 10:17. The chalk was still in her hand. The intercom hissed to life. "Attention, students. We are now going into lockdown. This is not a drill." I looked to my left. Ryan and Lily were gone. Their backpacks were still there. The chimes began to toll, and the voice said, "Room 204, 3 students missing." The next story takes us far away from Lincoln High, to a smaller, older building, one that's been standing so long, they've stopped bothering to keep track of all its renovations and add-ons. Sometimes, in a place like that, walls hide more than they're supposed to. Kaylee Tran hated her school. It wasn't the teachers or the classes. Those were fine. It was the building itself. Every hallway looked the same. Every floor creaked in the exact same way. And every time you turned a corner, you could swear you'd been there before. And there was one part of the school that she'd been told never to go near. It wasn't an official rule. No one announced it at assemblies. But everyone knew. There was a section on the second floor behind the old trophy case in the east wing where the tiles didn't match. The lighting was dimmer, and the air always felt cooler. You didn't walk that way unless you had to. You didn't linger there, and you definitely didn't go past the locked metal door at the end. The rumors were endless. Some said it led to a storage closet full of moldy textbooks and broken desks. Others swore it was an unused stairwell that led to a sealed-off basement level. But the most popular story, the one whispered during lunch breaks, was that there was an extra hallway back there, one that didn't appear on any blueprint, and that anyone who walked down it never came back. Kaylee didn't believe it, not really. But she avoided the area anyway, just like everyone else. Until the lockdown. It was the middle of fourth period, history class. Kaylee was half asleep at her desk when the intercom crackled to life. Attention staff and students, this is a lockdown. I repeat, this is a lockdown. Please follow all procedures immediately. This is not a drill. Her teacher, Mr. Fisher, froze for only a moment before springing into action. He shut off the lights, ordered everyone away from the windows, and had them huddle in the far corner. Kaylee's pulse spiked. Lockdowns happened once or twice a year, usually just drills, but they always announced it was a drill. This time, they didn't. Someone knocked on the door, hard, 3 times. Mr. Fisher didn't move. Whoever it was knocked again, louder. And then they spoke. A girl's voice. "Let me in. Please, it's coming." No one moved. The voice grew more frantic. "Please, please let me in. It's right behind me." Kaylee's breath hitched. She recognized that voice. It was Amber Green, a junior who sat 2 rows over in the cafeteria. But before anyone could react, the sound changed. The pounding stopped. And Amber's voice shifted. It grew lower, raspy, like something was speaking through her. "Why is the door locked? You know I can find another way in." Mr. Fisher silently motioned for everyone to stay still. And then, they heard it. Footsteps, moving away from the door, then turning a corner, and getting fainter. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, without warning, the intercom clicked again. "Room 204, evacuate immediately. Use the East Wing exit." Mr. Fisher frowned. That was their room. And they weren't supposed to move during a lockdown. Still. The voice on the intercom sounded exactly like Principal Hartman. They gathered quickly, Mr. Fisher leading them into the hallway. It was quiet. Too quiet. And as they moved towards the East Wing, Kaylee realized exactly where they were headed. The dim corridor. The one behind the trophy case. The moment they stepped into that section, everything felt wrong. The air grew colder. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, buzzing like dying insects. And every step echoed, as if the hallway were much larger than it actually was. At the end of the corridor stood the locked metal door, except it wasn't locked anymore. It hung slightly ajar, revealing blackness beyond. Mr. Fisher hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. But the voice of the principal came again. Not from the intercom this time, from the open doorway. "In here, quickly before it comes back." The sound didn't echo. It slid across the floor, curling around their feet. One by one, the students stepped inside. Kaylee followed, her skin prickling with cold sweat. On the other side was another hallway, but it didn't look like any part of their school. The walls were too narrow, the floor warped and uneven, the ceiling hung low, pipes dripping something dark and sticky, and the lights weren't fluorescent at all. They were bare bulbs, swaying slightly, though there was no breeze. The door slammed shut behind them. Mr. Fisher tried the handle. Nothing. Then he swore under his breath. The door was gone. Just another stretch of wall. That's when they heard it. Footsteps from both ends of the hallway. Slow, deliberate, and heavy enough to make the floor vibrate. Kaylee grabbed the nearest classmate, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" The answer came from somewhere in the dark ahead. Amber's voice. Only not quite hers. "You shouldn't have come here." The bell never rang again. At least not in the way it should have. After the night of the ghost in the gym, I thought I'd never set foot in Westbrook High after dark again. But life, as it tends to do in these kinds of stories, didn't ask for my opinion. 1 month later, it happened again. Another lockdown. This time in the middle of the day. The kind where the lights shut off in the hallways without warning, the PA system crackles, and a voice that's supposed to sound calm tells everyone to get inside a classroom immediately. It was second period algebra, the kind of class where the clock moves slower than molasses. Mr. Kellerman was mid-equation when the PA clicked on. "Attention staff and students, we are now in lockdown. This is not a drill." There was no announcement of "intruder in the building" or "remain calm." Just those 8 words, the click of the speaker shutting off, and then silence so thick you could hear the dust settle. Everyone froze. I remember thinking how weird the lighting looked, like the hallway fluorescents outside the glass door were bending, not flickering, bending, like someone was tugging at the light itself. Mr. Kellerman shut the door, turned the lock, and motioned for us to move away from the windows. Standard procedure. But then he did something strange. He put his ear to the door. His face went pale. We all listened, but at first, there was nothing. Then, footsteps. Slow, measured. 1 step every 3 or 4 seconds. Not sneakers, not heels. Something heavier, more deliberate, with a faint scrape between steps, like someone was dragging the tip of a cane or a metal rod. They passed our door, then stopped. My skin went ice cold. The sound of someone breathing, low, ragged, like they were trying to draw in every molecule of air, filled the hallway. Then something tapped against the glass window in the door. But when we looked, the window was black. Not like a shadow, like the glass had been painted over from the inside. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then, without warning, the PA came on again. But it wasn't the principal's voice this time. It was a whisper. A long, drawn-out hiss that carried through every speaker in the school. Find the hallway. Find the hallway. Find the hallway. The glass cleared instantly, as if someone had wiped it clean. The hallway looked normal, empty. Except it wasn't. Because now, where there should have been the science wing stretching out ahead, there was something else. A hallway I'd never seen before. It was longer than anything that could physically fit inside Westbrook High. The floor wasn't tile, it was some kind of black stone, smooth and slightly reflective, like wet obsidian. The walls, I don't even know if they were walls. They looked like shadow, given shape, breathing slowly in and out. And at the far end, a door. Old, wooden, the kind you'd see on a farmhouse from 100 years ago. It was open just a crack. No one in our classroom said a word, but I knew in that unspoken gut-level way that the thing on the other side of that door was the reason for the lockdown. The problem was, that hallway hadn't been there before. And yet now, somehow, it wanted me to walk down it. I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed against it. But something, curiosity, fear, something darker, made me step toward the door. Behind me, the rest of the classroom seemed frozen. Even Mr. Kellerman wasn't moving. I realized with a sick lurch that their eyes weren't following me. They were staring straight ahead, blinking in slow, synchronized rhythm, like dolls. The tapping returned. This time, it was coming from inside the black hallway. I stepped across the threshold, and the temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged in front of me, and every sound from the school, the hum of lights, the distant voices, was gone. There was only my footsteps, and the faint echo of someone else's, perfectly matching my pace. The shadows along the walls seemed to watch. They bulged and swayed when I passed, and I swear I saw hands pressing against them from the other side, their fingers long and too many jointed. I reached the door at the end. The wood was splintered and soft, like it had been soaking in water for years. Through the crack, I saw movement, something pale, shifting in the dark. Then the voice came again. But this time, it wasn't over the PA. It was right in my ear. "Don't let it see you leave." Before I could react, the door swung open. The click of the door unlocking was sharp enough to make my ears ring in the silence. Mason's breath hitched in my ear. We didn't move. The handle turned halfway, then stopped. A second click. This one slower. The handle began to move again, a full rotation, and the door eased open without a sound. From the crack, I could see the hallway. But it wasn't our hallway anymore. It was the same stretch of school, but tilted, like the whole building had been turned on its side. Lockers stretched upward into the ceiling, gravity forgotten. A lone desk floated lazily in midair. The strobe lights were gone. Instead, the glow came from hundreds of thin red lines etched along the walls, slowly pulsing, like the veins of some living thing. Mason whispered, "We can make a run for it." I wanted to believe him. But the thing about running is, you have to know what you're running toward. Here, there was no end in sight. The air was warm. Too warm. The kind of heat that feels like someone is breathing against the back of your neck. We stepped out. The sound returned almost instantly. The whispers. But this time, they weren't coming from the air. They were in the floor, beneath us. Each step made them louder until we were both tiptoeing, trying not to make the linoleum groan. That's when we heard footsteps, not ours. Ahead, around the corner, I knew that gate. I'd heard it every day since freshman year. It was Mr. Kellerman, our math teacher. Relief almost made my knees give out. "Mr. Kellerman," I called. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. Then his head slowly leaned into view from around the corner. Only, it wasn't his head. It was the shape of it, but stretched wrong. His neck was far too long, the skin sagging in places like wet paper. His eyes were gone, replaced by two hollow sockets that went on forever. And when he smiled, the skin at the corners of his mouth cracked, black fluid trickling down his chin. "Back to class," he said in a voice that sounded like three people speaking at once. I grabbed Mason and bolted in the other direction. The hallway warped with every step. Doors appeared where they shouldn't be. Some opened onto endless staircases that went nowhere. Others opened into classrooms filled with desks, each one occupied by a mannequin wearing our classmates' clothes, heads slowly turning as we passed. The whispers grew frantic, not words anymore, just a rising pitch that drilled into my skull. And then, the siren, the lockdown siren. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the intercom. It was inside my head. Mason stumbled. "I can't." I yanked him forward toward a final door at the end of the warped hallway. It was glowing faintly white, the only color that didn't look corrupted here. We slammed it open and stepped into our classroom, normal, bright. The other students staring at us like we'd just barged in late. Mrs. Caldwell stood at the board, mid-lesson. "Take your seats," she said, as if nothing had happened. Mason looked at me, his face pale. "Did we dream it?" I was about to answer when I noticed the window. From outside, pressed against the glass, was a milky white grin. "You probably think the school lockdown is over now, that the sirens stopped, that the lights came back on. But schools have long memories. They remember every step you've ever taken inside them. Every time you hid in a corner, thinking you were safe. And sometimes, they call you back. That's the thing about the lockdown you just heard. It didn't happen once. It happens again and again, to different people in different hallways in different years. Some make it out, some don't. And those who don't, they become the faces you see staring from the windows. The ones who never blink. The ones who wait for the next lockdown to start, so they can finally step inside again. So if you're ever at school and the lights flicker, if the PA system crackles to life, but you can't quite make out the words, don't look towards the end of the hallway, because if you do, you'll see them, and they'll already be walking toward you.